Hi there. So today on Ask Deb, the questions that I've received. So the first one is from Sarah, who's mum to Emily, age 6. And she says, my daughter Emily is the sweetest little girl, but she cries over the tiniest things. If her sock feels funny, if her drawing doesn't turn out how she imagined, or if I say no to something, she's immediately in tears. I'm worried life is going to be so hard for her. Is she just overly sensitive and should I be trying to toughen her up? Okay, so sensitivity isn't a flaw. So some children are just much more sensitive than other children. Um, some kids are quite hard. Some kids are sort of in between, and then you get children who are super, super sensitive. And it's not a flaw, it's just a different way of being wired. It's just a different way that her body works, the way her brain works. And I think what I would just keep an eye on is that validate her emotions and validate when she's feeling sensitive, no matter what is going on. But I would also try and build her confidence a little bit more because sometimes sensitive children, there's two things that can happen if you have a sensitive child. You can either become over nurturing or you could become the opposite and become quite hard and say, just pull up your socks and just get on with it. And both of them are not ideal because when you're too hard on them, they feel invalidated and she might feel like you don't understand her, you don't get her. And as much as you want to be hard on her because you want to toughen her up, it's just going to make her feel 100 times worse about herself. She's not going to feel good about herself at all. So I wouldn't do that. And then if you over nurture her, you could almost like become a parent that enables her. Now, there's nothing wrong with being sensitive, but what I mean is if you over nurture her, she's not going to have enough confidence in herself to do certain things because with sensitive children, they feel the world so much deeper. They experience life in a very different way to what other children experience. And there's a strength in that. And you want her to understand that her sensitivity is unique and it's a power, it's a strength, it's not a weakness. Because I think a lot of times sensitive children are taught like or treated like they're pathetic or they're little broken birds or, they get dismissed a lot and they get ignored a lot. And I know you don't want that to happen with your child because being sensitive, she's going to turn into somebody that's very empathetic. She might enter into a field where her sensitivity is a massive strength of understanding other people, understanding their behavior. And you want to nurture that, but not in a way that overprotects her, that holds her back from the world. Am I making sense? I hope I'm making sense. Yeah, I think I'm making sense. So it's about being confident, but also understanding that a sensitivity is a fantastic trait to have. And so confidence is about saying to your child, you know what, I know you feel really deeply, and that is okay. But also helping them to feel that and still get on with their day. Because with sensitivity, often children grow up into adults who feel very responsible for other people's emotions. They feel they can almost develop and become over empathetic, over compassionate. They feel everything. They feel other people's emotions. They feel the vibe. They feel the energy. And so you want them to know that about themselves, that so that they can also learn how to differentiate between their own emotions and somebody else's emotions, because it can become like really confusing. I would advise you to read, there's a book called, there's a book called, where's it gone now? The Highly Sensitive Person. And there's one of I think it's also called Highly Sensitive Children. It's by Elaine Aaron. I'm not sure how you say her surname, but I would really highly recommend that you read that because you'll see that with sensitive children, they're often very sensitive with other things as well. For instance, like with their skin, um, they don't like labels. their skin gets very scratchy quite easily. And you've got to help her to develop her resilience as well, so that she can bounce back and not get stuck in that sensitivity. So, say for instance, she's crying over something, and even if you think it's irrational, don't tell her it's irrational. Just allow her to have those emotions. But if she's crying over something, you can validate it and say, I'm sorry that this has upset you, or I'm so sorry that this is hurting you. And then be with her for a little bit, give her a cuddle, but then move on. So don't allow her to get sucked down into that, because being resilient is being able to feel those feelings but bounce back and carry on with life. Okay, so that's the one thing I would say. Also, know that tears aren't manipulation. It's often as a sign of overstimulation or overwhelm, because sensitive children feel emotions so much deeper and so much stronger, and sensitive human beings, not just children. And so sometimes they've got to cry to allow the overwhelm to be released from their body. So just know that one thing. And then the other thing is that I wanted to say to you, also teach her how to self-regulate. So what that means is it's not a case of allowing a child to cry it out, because that's often what we were taught back in the day. That I know there's still some parents that do it. They just allow a child to cry it out, and you don't want to do that, because you're leaving them alone with all those emotions and feelings. So don't do that. But what I'm saying is you've got to teach her how to self-regulate. And how you do that is you teach her that by example, by saying to her, I can see you feeling upset. I know this isn't a great feeling. I know this is uncomfortable. And sometimes it's hard to deal with the sadness. But what would make you feel better right now? Would you like a cuddle? Would you like to lie down? Would you like to read a book? So you offer her things that she can do that are going to make her feel better. The other things that you can do with a sensitive child to help their bodies regulate a little bit and feel better is you can get a weighted blanket. Um, that really helps to sort of calm the nervous system down. Um, what are the other things that I would suggest? Also, lighting is very important for them. So bright lights are sometimes overwhelming, too much noise. So nice calming music is very self-regulating. So if you have a space in your room, or if she's got her own bedroom, then make her room a really nice calming space. So which has got soft lighting, soft colors, not harsh colors, soft music. All of those things are going to help her to self-regulate. So I would suggest that you try that with her. But yes, she sounds like a very sensitive child, and as I said, that is a massive strength to have. And so you want to see it as that and help her to understand that, because it can be extremely overwhelming when a child feels so many emotions and so strongly. I've just got the fan going on. It's really hot. So just excuse the hair and the paper and everything going everywhere. Okay, so the second one comes from Laura, who's mum to Sophie, 10 years old. And it says, Sophie constantly worries about other people. She worries if I'm tired, if grandma is feeling lonely, if her teacher seems upset, and even about things she hears on the news. She's such a caring child, but she carries everyone else's emotions on her shoulders. How can I help her care without feeling responsible for everyone? Okay, so Sophie sounds like a really empathetic child, and it's such a beautiful quality. It's actually the foundation of emotional intelligence, and it's something that we want everybody to have, is to have more empathy. But when your child is young and they haven't really learned yet how to manage that empathy, it can turn into almost like a feeling of responsibility, because they start worrying about other people all the time. And so you've got to find a way to teach her that it's okay to care about somebody, but it's not her job to fix it. And I think this is where the trouble comes in with children, when they can see somebody suffering, when they overthink somebody else's situation, They imagine them, they put themselves into that situation. They imagine that they're there or they're that person, and then they take responsibility for that and they want to fix it. So you've got to explain to Sophie that it's a beautiful quality that she has, worrying or caring about other people, but to differentiate between the worry and caring, because worrying, I think, is often we feel like that's almost like a love language. We feel like, if we're worrying about somebody, that's the way of showing that we love somebody, or it can develop into that. I've seen adults where they believe that, if they worry about their children, they worry about their grandchildren, that it shows that they're caring about them, but they're not doing anything with that worry. And so it's affecting them. And you don't want Sophie to grow into an adult that feels or seems or thinks that worrying is a way of loving somebody. So the difference between worrying and caring is, obviously, caring is you care deeply for somebody. Worrying is when you just think about it and you don't do anything about it. But what it does is it affects you as a human being. But then it can become a responsibility. So Sophie might think, well, you know what, if I don't do something about this, then nobody else will. And I think that's where you've got to help her to understand that it's a beautiful thing that she's caring, but it's not her job to fix that. You can also do things like make suggestions. So say, for instance, she's worrying about grandma being alone, but maybe grandma actually really likes being alone. Or you can do something about it. And so to stop Sophie from worrying about it, you can say, well, why don't you give grandma a call and have a little conversation with her over the phone? And then you can talk privately to grandma and say, listen, Sophie really worries that you on your own. Can you maybe sometime just drop it in there that you don't mind being on your own, or if you are lonely, that you will call, and then tell your daughter the same thing and say, you know what? I'm sure grandma will tell us if she's lonely. But you know what? Now and then we can check in on her. We can phone her. We can take her out for tea or whatever the case may be. But she needs to understand that grandma's problems is not her problems, that those are adult problems, that those are grandma's problems. Grandma will do something about it if she is lonely. And I think where a lot of these issues come from with children who worry about the world is when we make this mistake of sometimes saying to our own children, and I remember this happened with my son, and I was so annoyed when it was said a couple of times because I knew the implications of what would happen. So I had a conversation with him afterwards. But I remember somebody saying to my son, look after your mom, when he was a child. And I know that the person meant well, but it's the worst thing you can say to a child, because a child will take that literally and they'll think, oh my goodness, it's my job. I've got to look after my mom, or I've got to look after grandma. And so often we say those kinds of things without thinking about how it's going to affect a child. So have that conversation with Sophie and just say, you can care for your grandma, but it's not your job to look after her. Grandma's job is to look after herself. And when she can't look after herself anymore, that's mom and dad's job. That's not your job. But you can phone and find out if grandma's okay, or you can check in on her, or you can go visit her, or whatever the case may be. So please, please, please make sure that you have that conversation with her, because you don't want to end up with a child that feels responsible for everybody when she grows up one day, as you said. um, right. Oh, and the other thing as well, please make sure that you help her to understand that everybody's feelings are their own. You are not responsible for anybody else's feelings. And I want to say that to the adults out there as well, is that often we'll say to our children, we'll say things like, you make me angry, or it's because of you that I am now late, or whatever. We make, and that's why I'm frustrated. And so we make our children responsible for our feelings. They're not responsible for your feelings. Only you are responsible for your feelings. Nobody can physically get into your body and make you feel a certain way, because our feelings are based on our interpretation of life, of events, or what is going on. So make sure that you explain that to her as well, that she doesn't feel that she's responsible for her grandma's feelings. Okay. Right. The next one. This comes from Rebecca, who's mum to Noah, who's 7 years old. Noah's teacher tells me he's quiet, polite, and helpful all day, but the moment he gets home, he explodes over the smallest things. It's like he has been replaced by another child. Why does he save all his meltdowns for me, and why does he take it out on me? Okay, this is quite an interesting one. And this is something that therapists call restraint collapse. So, what this means is, and I'll tell you a quick story about this because I was astounded at my granddaughter when she said this to my daughter. I think it was when she was 6 years old. My daughter had exactly the same question. And her daughter was coming home from school and she was mean to her mom in the car. She was mean to her at home. And one day she said to her, she said, I don't understand. She said, at school, you're this model student. The teachers say you're so amazing and you're so cooperative and you're so kind. And then you get in the car or you get home and you're just mean. And this 6-year-old said to her mom, all day long, I've got to be at school and I've got to do as I'm told and I've got to listen to everybody else. And I just want to be able to let loose at home. And that's exactly what it is. Because if you think about it, children at school, they have to be restrained, right? They're not allowed to talk in class. They have to ask the teacher for a break or when they can have a break to go to the toilet, when they can speak. They've got to put their hand up. Gosh, I mean, it's just, it's such a controlled environment. They're not allowed to be themselves. And then there's always that threat of punishment or detention or something's going to happen if they don't comply. So a child sits there all day long, being restrained, being restrained, being restrained. They get so overwhelmed. All of those feelings, the emotions, that energy is building up in their body. So when they get home, they're like, wah, and they just want to let loose. And they do it with the people that they feel the safest with. So it's a compliment in a way because your child feels safe to allow all of that, to release all of that with you because they feel safe that they can do that with you at home. And so allow them to just release all those emotions, all that energy. Something else I want to say is that unfortunately, most schools, I don't know if schools like this exist yet, where they teach children differently according to their learning styles. So all children have different brain profiles. They've got different personalities and they've got different learning styles. And what that means, and that's besides children who have ADD, who are who have what's the word I'm looking for? Dyslexic, you are neurodivergent. So besides that, all children learn differently. So we've got these different styles where some children learn best by listening and hearing, others by seeing, others are kinesthetic, which means they need to move the whole time. They learn more with sort of body movements. So there's all these different ways. And unfortunately, in schools, unless you're in a class for neurodivergent children, you all taught in the same way. So I know, for instance, I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I have to move all the time. I can't just sit still. It's impossible. Because what happens, like for somebody like me, for instance, and like me as a child, so now you're told you've got to sit still. So all you're focusing on is sitting still. So you're not learning, you're not absorbing the information, and it's really hard to do. So if you can imagine there's a child that now they've got to listen, but actually they learn more by sight or they learn more in a kinesthetic way, they're forced to learn in a way that the teacher is teaching. And that also overwhelms the child's nervous system, the emotional system, the energy system. So the frustration builds up, but they've got to comply because they're at school and they want to do well and they want to please the teacher and they want to please the parent and they don't want to be punished and they don't want to go to detention. So it's a lot for a child. So, of course, when they come home, they can just go "Bleh," and then allow them to release that. Uh, in a couple of other videos I've mentioned, which I'll mention again, so how you can help them to do that is to have a conversation with them, ask them what makes them feel better. And if they don't know, you can suggest certain things. Nature is by far the best thing. If you take your child out for a walk just in nature, if they're not too tired, just being amongst trees and grass is just amazing. Or if you lucky enough to have a lovely garden, get them to go and sit out in the garden, go and sit on the swing, just something without a screen, no screens, just nature. Another thing, if you can't do that, let them jump on a little mini trampoline. Let them hit a pillar, let them just roll around on the floor, let them dance it out, but just allow them to get rid of all that excess energy. Jump rope. So find something that they like. I know when one of my grandsons, I've got five, one of my grandsons, when he was little, he used to have like a boxing bag. So he used to, punch this bag. I think two of them actually had that. Another one of them liked to just color in and draw, just mindless. Don't let your children come home and then expect them to do homework straight away. They need to unwind, they need to decompress the same way that when you get back from work, if you do work or if you have work, you need to decompress first. So allow them to decompress first and then ignore the bad behavior and see it for what it is. It's just them decompressing. It's not that they're being rude. It's not that they're being personal. It's just that they need to let it all out. Okay, big subject, that one. I have space for one more. This one is my daughter always says it's not fair. And this comes from Andrew and his dad to Isla, who's 8 years old. Everything is not fair according to Isla. If a brother gets something different, if I ask her to do a chore first, or if she has to go to bed before her cousin, she immediately complains that life isn't fair. How do I help her stop seeing everything this way? Okay. So children have got this way of comparing because they're trying to understand justice. What is justice? In our family, when it comes to fairness, my mom used to be very fair, and then I picked up that trait so much so that if there's a slab of chocolate, I will break it into equal pieces and I'll hand it out. And if I give the one child one thing, I have to give the other one, and the one grandchild. I'm always very, very fair because it's just kind of the way that I've been and the way I was raised by my mom, and that it's always fair. But what you can teach your child is this, that I think a lot of times children misunderstand and they think that equal is the same as fair, and they're not the same. Because if you think about it, your son, I don't think you mentioned. No, you don't say how old your brother is. Um, but children want to be treated equally. And so if your son is older or if he's younger, maybe he's getting more privileges. If he's older or if he's younger, maybe he's also getting a different kind of privilege because he needs more attention. And so children want to be treated equally, and then they think, but it's not fair, but it's got nothing to do with the being equal. And so how you can explain this to Isla is that you can say to her, you know, um, when your brother gets something, maybe it's a new pair of trainers or something like that, you can say, and she hasn't got a new pair of trainers. So she's now measuring. She's like, it's like for like with a child, like for like. He got new trainers, I get new trainers. You can say to him, well, actually, he needs a new pair of trainers, but remember last week you got a new pair of sandals or you got a new pair of ballet shoes, and you can explain how that works. So it's not about giving them exactly the same thing, but it is fair, or you are treating them equally, but it seems like it isn't fair because you're not getting exactly the same thing. Do you know what I'm saying? You can also say this. So say, for instance, your brother is older, or the cousin who goes to bed later than she does. You can say, well, you know what? Your brother or your cousin used to go to bed at the same time when they were 8 years old, because when you're 8 years old, you need more sleep. Your brain is still developing in a different way. So your brother and your cousin also used to go to bed at 8. So it's not that they got more privileges or they're staying up later than you. It's just that you at a different stage in your life. Does that make sense? Because as I said, children think fairness is about like for like, but when you point it out to them in the same sort of way, or in a way that they can understand, with her brother might play football, she might be doing ballet or tennis or something. And so when you compare it with those and he might not. So when you compare it and say, well, you know, he's getting that for his tennis, you getting that for your ballet, then they start to understand that there's a difference between equality and fairness, because you are being completely equal with them, but in different ways. I hope that makes sense. Okay, great. So that's all I have time for right now. So if you've got a burning question or a question that you need some help with pertaining to your child's emotions, their behavior, or anything else that's really getting you down, or that you just need a little bit of help and advice for, um, click the link below, submit your question, and just remember you can always stay anonymous. Just make sure that you add in your real email address so that I can pop you an email when your question goes live. So if you want to use a fake name, you can use a fake name for your children, whatever. It's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you give me an age, include a gender if possible, and your correct email address. I'll see you in the next episode of Ask Deb. Bye for now.